The waiting room smelled like lemon disinfectant and something else Marina couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or just the particular staleness of recycled air in a place where people came to hear words that changed everything. She sat with her phone in her lap, thumb hovering over the screen, staring at her wallpaper photo, Greg mid-laugh at their vineyard wedding, holding her like gravity itself couldn't pull them apart. His eyes crinkled at the corners the way they did when joy caught him off guard. She remembered the moment. He'd just whispered something about how her dress made her look like she was made of light, and she'd rolled her eyes, and he'd laughed like that. She opened her messages, typed, "Appointments at 2, could use the company." 3 dots appeared immediately, her chest loosened. Then they vanished. 10 seconds. 20. The dots came back. Swamped. Big pitch. "You got this." Marina stared at the flexed bicep emoji until it stopped looking like encouragement and started looking like a tiny yellow dismissal. She locked her phone. The woman across from her, 70 maybe, with a silk scarf wrapped around her head, was reading a paperback mystery, completely absorbed. No one sat in the chair beside her either. "Marina?" The nurse stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, face professionally kind. Marina pocketed her phone and stood. Her footsteps echoed differently than they had 6 months ago, the first time she'd walked this hallway. Then, Greg had been beside her, his hand at the small of her back, solid and sure. Now the sound was just hers, one set of shoes on linoleum, sharp and singular. The exam room was the same pale blue it had always been. Dr. Patel came in with that particular blend of warmth and caution that oncologists seem to master in medical school. She pulled up Marina's scans on the monitor, pointing to areas that meant something in a language Marina had been forced to learn. "These look good," Dr. Patel said, and Marina watched her face for the microsecond of hesitation that would mean otherwise. It didn't come. "Really good? The treatment's working exactly how we hoped." Marina exhaled, nodded, felt her eyes sting and blinked it back. "How's your support system?" Dr. Patel asked, the way she always did, pen poised over her notes. "Solid," Marina said. The word came out thin, like something stretched too far. She cleared her throat. "My husband's been great. My sister calls every week." Dr. Patel held her gaze for just a moment longer than necessary, then smiled and made a note. "Good. That matters more than people realize." She went over the next phase of treatment, the timeline for the next scan, the signs to watch for. Marina nodded in all the right places, asked the questions she'd written in her phone at 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. By the time she left, she had a folder of papers she'd read a dozen times and a follow-up appointment card for next month. In the parking garage, she sat in her car with her hands on the steering wheel, not turning the ignition. 3 spaces over, a man in his 50s was helping his mother into a sedan, one hand supporting her elbow, the other holding her purse and a Walgreens bag. The mother said something Marina couldn't hear, and the man laughed, patient and unhurried. He made sure she was settled before closing the door gently, like she was something precious. Marina's phone sat in the cup holder. No messages. She started the car. Their house was in one of those suburbs where every lawn looked the same, and the HOA sent passive-aggressive letters about mailbox colors. Greg's Audi was in the driveway when she pulled up, black and sleek and detailed every weekend like it was a show car. She grabbed her folder from the passenger seat and went inside. He was in his office, door half closed, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear. He saw her through the glass, held up one finger, kept talking. His other hand waved in that universal gesture that meant give me a minute or not now, or maybe just I'm busy and you're not. Marina went upstairs, changed out of her appointment clothes. The jeans that still fit, the soft sweater that didn't irritate her port sight, and into leggings and an old college t-shirt. She could hear Greg's voice downstairs, animated, persuasive. The voice he used when he wanted something. When she came back down 20 minutes later, his office door was still closed. She microwaved leftover pasta from 2 nights ago, ate standing at the counter looking out at the backyard, where the motion sensor light kept flickering on for no reason. The pasta was fine. Everything was fine. Greg came down a little after 9, tie loosened, hair perfect. He kissed the top of her head, quick, automatic, and grabbed a LaCroix from the fridge. "Pitch went great," he said, popping the tab. "Nailed it. Dave thinks we'll have an answer by Friday." "That's good," Marina said. He drank, scrolled through his phone, laughed at something. "How was your day?" She looked at him, waited to see if he'd remember. His thumb kept moving across the screen. Fine, she said. Ran some errands. Cool. He kissed her head again on his way back upstairs. I've got some emails to finish. Don't wait up. She stood there until she heard his office door click shut, then washed her single dish and went to bed. The pattern revealed itself slowly, the way things do when you're not ready to see them all at once. Her follow-up was scheduled for the first Tuesday in November. She mentioned it over breakfast on a Sunday, casual, just letting him know. Greg nodded, sipped his coffee, said, "Whoa, what time?" 2:30. Ah, damn, I'm slammed that day. Client meetings stacked back to back. He looked genuinely apologetic, or maybe just genuinely distracted. You'll be okay though, right? It's just a check-in? Right, Marina said, just a check-in. 2 weeks later, she suggested they update their wills. Her sister Lucia had mentioned it, said it was something people should do, especially when health got complicated. Greg was on the couch watching a game, beer in hand. Yeah, totally, he said. We should do that. I'll look at my calendar. He never looked at his calendar, but he was free for poker night with his CrossFit friends, free for the charity golf tournament his firm sponsored, free to drive 2 hours to look at a vintage motorcycle he'd been thinking about. Marina started noticing it everywhere, the hierarchy of his availability, the math of what mattered. She existed somewhere below recreational activities and above laundry, but the gap was narrowing. She mentioned it once, carefully over breakfast on a Saturday. You haven't asked about my health in 3 weeks? Greg looked up from his phone, genuinely confused. Blinked. I figured you'd tell me if something was wrong. You always do. Sure. That's how fear works. You announce it like a weather report, casual and expected, to someone scrolling through sports highlights. Right, she said. Everything's good, though, he asked, already looking back at his screen. Yeah, everything's good. Her sister called that night from Portland. Lucia had a sixth sense for when Marina was performing okayness. How are you really? She asked, no preamble. Marina was in the garage, folding laundry on top of the dryer because Greg's stuff was spread across the bed and she didn't want to move it. Tired, she said. Tired from treatment or tired from life? Yes. Lucia was quiet for a moment. I can fly out. Just say the word. I've got miles saved up and Kevin can handle the kids for a weekend. I'm okay, Marina said, but she held the offer in her chest like a gold coin, something valuable she might need later. The offer doesn't expire, Lucia said, because she knew. After they hung up, Marina sat in the car in the closed garage, not running, just sitting, and let herself imagine it. Lucia showing up with that fierce protectiveness she'd had since they were kids, the way she'd cataloged every injustice and remembered every slight. It would feel good. It would also feel like admitting something Marina wasn't ready to admit yet. She went back inside. Greg was on a call in his office laughing about something. She closed the bedroom door. The pottery studio was an accident of timing. Marina had signed up for a beginner's class 3 months before her diagnosis, part of some vague plan to have hobbies that didn't involve watching Greg watch sports. She'd almost canceled after the news, but Lucia had said, "Why? Your hands still work, don't they?" So she'd gone. Now it was the only place that felt like hers. The studio smelled like wet earth and kiln heat. Her hands disappeared into clay, centering, pulling, shaping, and the noise in her head went quiet. No one there knew about the cancer except Ruth, and only because Ruth had noticed Marina's port scar when she reached for a tool. Ruth was 70-something, silver-haired with the kind of bone structure that made Marina think she'd been devastating at 30. She worked on massive sculptural pieces that looked like frozen music. She also had opinions about men, marriage, and the various ways women were taught to make themselves small. My late husband missed my mastectomy, Ruth said one evening, trimming excess clay from a vessel's rim with surgical precision. Said he had a critical golf tournament. Critical? I asked him what the prize was. He said bragging rights. Marina looked up from her wonky bowl. What did you do? Ruth smiled all edges. Divorced him the day I got my pathology results. Took half of everything, including his precious golf clubs. Sold them on eBay for $50. Were they worth more? Much more. Ruth's smile sharpened. That was the point. Marina laughed. Actual laughter, the kind that came from somewhere real. It felt strange in her chest, like a muscle she'd forgotten she had. That night she came home and found Greg on the phone with his brother. She could hear him through the office door as she grabbed water from the kitchen. She's fine, man. Treatment's working. Yeah, I know I should be more, but she's handling it. She's tough. She doesn't need me hovering, you know? Marina stood there, glass in hand, listening to her husband explain her resilience like it was his achievement. She went upstairs, opened their shared financial documents, the ones Greg had always handled because he was better with numbers, he said, and she didn't mind, she'd said, which had been true until it wasn't. She clicked through account after account, investment portfolios, retirement funds, life insurance, the house deed. Beneficiary designations stared back at her from every page. Most of them were automated, default settings from when they'd first married. Greg's parents as secondary beneficiaries on things she didn't remember discussing. His college roommate listed as backup on one random investment account, probably from before they'd even met. Her name appeared, sure. But not the way she'd assumed. She stared at the screen until the pixels blurred, then closed the laptop and sat in the dark. The estate attorney's office was in a building downtown that tried too hard to look important. Marble floors, leather furniture, a receptionist who spoke in hushed corporate tones. Marina told Greg she was going, framed it as routine, just updating some stuff. Whatever you think, he'd said without looking up from his laptop. You're better at that detail stuff anyway. The attorney was younger than Marina expected, sharp-suited and efficient. She pulled up their documents with a few keystrokes, and Marina watched their entire financial life appear on a monitor mounted to the wall. So most of your assets are titled jointly, the attorney said, which means they'd pass to the surviving spouse automatically. But your secondary beneficiaries are interesting. She tilted her head, scanning. Greg's parents on the investment accounts, his brother on the life insurance. Was that intentional? I don't know, Marina said. Greg handled the setup. The attorney's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, of a story she'd heard before. Legally, there's nothing wrong with it. It's pretty standard for estate planning. But if something happened to both of you, everything would flow to his family. Marina felt something cold settle in her stomach. What about my family? Not designated anywhere in these documents. They sat there for a moment, the hum of the building's ventilation system the only sound. Can I change that? Marina asked. The attorney slid a blank beneficiary designation form across the desk. You can change anything you want. It's your life. Marina stared at the form, her name at the top, blank lines below, waiting. Hypothetically, she said slowly, if I wanted to designate beneficiaries that reflected my priorities, my sister, maybe some causes I care about, how would that work? The attorney walked her through it. Primary beneficiaries, secondary, tertiary, percentages and contingencies, the language of planning for a future where you don't exist, spoken in the calm tones of someone who did this every day. By the end, Marina had a folder full of papers and a strange feeling in her chest. Not quite anger, not quite relief. Something sharper and cleaner than both. She drove home carefully under the speed limit, very aware of her hands on the wheel. Greg was there when she got back, which was unusual for a Wednesday. He'd brought takeout Thai from the place she liked, and had it spread across the kitchen counter like an offering. Thought I'd surprise you, he said, smiling. I know I've been distant lately. Work's just been insane. But it'll calm down soon, I promise. He looked so earnest, so sure that this, pad thai and spring rolls, was enough. Marina set her purse down, looked at the food, looked at him. That's nice, she said. They ate together at the counter, and he told her about his day, about the pitch that was going well, about Dave's new boat, about plans for the weekend. She nodded in the right places, laughed when something was funny, felt herself watching him from very far away, like an actress performing a role she used to believe in. You okay? He asked. You seem quiet. Just tired, she said. Well, don't push yourself. You need to rest. He squeezed her hand across the counter, quick and firm, then started clearing plates. Marina excused herself, went upstairs to their bedroom, and opened her laptop. The estate attorney's email was already there. Follow-up documents, instructions, the blank forms as PDFs. She opened a new document. Started a list. Primary beneficiary, Lucia. Secondary beneficiary, County Hospital Patient Support Fund. Tertiary beneficiary, Community Pottery Studio Scholarship Program. She stared at the names, thought about what each one meant. Lucia, who called every week and meant it when she asked how Marina was doing. The hospital fund because she'd seen too many people in that waiting room who looked lost and alone. The studio because Ruth had taught her that your hands could still create something beautiful even when everything else was falling apart. Her phone buzzed. Greg, from downstairs. Want to watch our show? She typed back, in a minute. Then she opened their bank's online portal, found the beneficiary change section. The website asked her to confirm her identity, security questions, verification codes. She answered them all. The form loaded. Her current beneficiaries stared back at her. Greg, primary. Greg's parents, secondary. She highlighted the fields, deleted. Typed in the new names, the new percentages. Her hands were steady. The cursor hovered over the blue submit button. In the window behind her laptop screen, she caught her reflection. Tired eyes, thinner face than a year ago, expression she didn't quite recognize. Outside, the motion sensor light in the backyard flickered on, illuminating nothing. She thought about the difference between being loved and being assumed. Between being someone's priority and being someone's habit. Between the man who'd held her at their wedding like she was made of light and the man downstairs who'd asked what the prize was at a golf tournament on the day his wife found out she had cancer. No, that was Ruth's story. But it could have been hers. Maybe it was hers, just quieter, just slower, just wrapped in pad thai and apologies that never quite reached the actual problem. Marina clicked submit. The confirmation page loaded. A small green checkmark appeared. An email notification chimed in her inbox, soft and definitive. Beneficiary designations updated successfully. She closed the laptop, sat there in the quiet. Downstairs she could hear the TV start up. Greg had chosen the show without her, was already 2 minutes into the episode they were supposed to watch together. She didn't go down. Instead, she lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Not quite peace, not quite power. Something in between, the strange, settling weight of a decision that couldn't be undone, didn't need to be explained, and belonged entirely to her. Outside, the motion sensor light clicked off again. Marina closed her eyes and let herself imagine the future in pieces. Lucia's guest room in Portland, her teaching certification renewed. Mornings that started with coffee she wanted to drink instead of coffee. She microwaved while her husband finished a call. Hands in clay. Quiet that felt like rest instead of abandonment. She fell asleep like that, fully dressed, laptop closed beside her, while downstairs Greg watched their show alone and didn't notice she never came down. The confirmation email was still in her inbox the next morning when Marina woke up. She checked it before. She got out of bed, half expecting it to have disappeared overnight, revealed as some fever dream of late-night clarity. But there it was, time-stamped 11:47 p.m., with that small green checkmark and the impersonal language of institutional certainty. Your beneficiary designations have been updated. Greg was already downstairs. She could hear him in the kitchen, the espresso machine hissing, cabinet doors opening and closing, the particular rhythm of his morning routine that never varied. She lay there for another minute, phone in hand, listening to the sounds of a man who had no idea anything had changed. When she came down, he was humming something, a song from the radio maybe, or just the ambient noise of contentment. He looked up when she entered, smiled that easy smile that used to make her stomach flip. "Morning. Sleep okay?" "Fine," she said. He poured her coffee without asking, added the cream the way she liked it, slid the mug across the counter. "I was thinking maybe we could do dinner out Friday. That Italian place you love. I've been a terrible husband lately. Let me make it up to you." Marina wrapped her hands around the mug. It was warm and solid and real. "You don't have to do that." "I want to." He leaned across the counter, kissed her forehead. "You deserve better than takeout and me being distracted all the time." She looked at him, really looked. He meant it, in the way people mean things when they're half paying attention. The same way someone might mean it when they say they'll call you back, or remember to pick up milk, or show up when it matters. Good intentions announced like they're the same thing as follow-through. "Friday sounds nice," she said, because what else was there to say? He grinned, squeezed her hand, went back to scrolling through his phone. She drank her coffee and watched him exist 3 feet away from her, completely unreachable. Her 6-month scan was on a Thursday. She'd marked it on the calendar in the kitchen, red pen, bold letters, impossible to miss. Greg saw it every morning when he checked the weather on his phone, which he did while standing right in front of the calendar. Wednesday night, she mentioned it. "Big day tomorrow." "Yeah?" He was on the couch, laptop open, half watching a documentary about something. What's going on? 6-month scan. He looked up and for a second something crossed his face. Guilt maybe, or just the dawning recognition that he'd forgotten something important. Oh, damn, that's tomorrow? He checked his phone. I have that client breakfast, the one with the Seattle people. I've been prepping for weeks. I know, Marina said. Can you reschedule? She stared at him. The scan? No, I mean, he ran his hand through his hair. Never mind, that's stupid. Of course you can't reschedule. This breakfast is really crucial, but you'll be fine, right? You've done this before. I'll be fine, Marina said. He looked relieved. Actually relieved. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Dinner Friday, and we'll do whatever you want this weekend. Full Marina agenda. She nodded, stood up, went to the kitchen to refill her water glass. Behind her, she heard the documentary resume, something about deep-sea creatures that survived in places without light. The hospital waiting room was crowded for a Thursday morning. Marina checked in, took her number, found a seat between a teenage boy with headphones and an elderly man doing a crossword in pen. Her phone buzzed. Greg, sending a photo of his breakfast plate at some waterfront restaurant, the Seattle skyline blurred in the background. Thinking of you. You got this. She liked the message but didn't reply. The scan itself took 40 minutes. The tech was new, younger than Marina, nervous hands and apologetic small talk. Marina lay still on the table and listened to the machine hum and click, mapping her insides in images she'd learned to read like a second language. The sounds were familiar now, almost comforting in their predictability. She closed her eyes and thought about the pottery wheel, about the way clay felt when it was perfectly centered, about Ruth's wave sculpture and how something frozen could still suggest motion. Afterward, she dressed slowly in the small changing room. Her clothes felt loose. She'd lost weight without trying, without really noticing until the waistband of her jeans gaped when she fastened them. She studied herself in the mirror. Thinner, yes. Tired, definitely. But something else, too. Something in her eyes that looked like the beginning of certainty. Dr. Patel's office was on the 3rd floor. Marina took the stairs instead of the elevator, counting each step, feeling her legs work, her lungs expand. Proof of life in motion. Dr. Patel came in with that same careful warmth, pulling up images on her monitor. Marina watched her face instead of the screen. The small crease between her eyebrows that would deepen if the news was bad. The slight upturn of her mouth that meant relief. Still stable, she said, and the relief in her voice was genuine. You're doing beautifully, Marina, really. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Marina nodded, felt her throat tighten, blinked hard. Are you okay? Dr. Patel asked, and the kindness in the question cracked something open. Marina cried for the first time since her diagnosis. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd allowed herself in the shower, but the kind that came from somewhere deep and unnamed. The kind that hurt on the way out. Dr. Patel handed her the tissue box and waited, patient as still water, not checking her watch or shifting in her chair or doing any of the things that would signal impatience. I'm fine, Marina said when she could speak. I'm relieved. And I'm tired. And I'm so tired of doing this alone. Dr. Patel didn't ask questions, just nodded, waited. He didn't come, Marina said, even though Dr. Patel hadn't asked. Again, he had a breakfast meeting with clients from Seattle. She laughed, but it came out broken. I don't even know what he does anymore. I used to know all his projects, all his pitches. Now I just know he's busy. Is there someone I can call? Someone who should be here? My sister, Marina said, but she's in Portland. Maybe she should be closer, Dr. Patel said quietly. Marina wiped her eyes, nodded, tried to smile. The tissue was damp and falling apart in her hands. Maybe. Before she left, Dr. Patel handed her the updated treatment plan and asked, Who's your emergency contact? Marina looked at the form. Greg's name, his cell number written in her handwriting from 6 months ago. The letters looked like someone else's, rounder, more optimistic. Can I update that? She asked. Dr. Patel slid a pen across the desk. Marina crossed out Greg's name and wrote Lucia's. The pen pressed harder than necessary, leaving an indent in the paper beneath. When she finished, she felt something shift in her chest. Not quite power, not quite peace, but something adjacent to both. Is there anything else you need today? Dr. Patel asked. Marina thought about it, shook her head. No, I think I have everything. On her way out, she stopped at the coffee cart in the lobby and bought herself a latte, the expensive kind with oat milk and an extra shot. She sat on one of the benches near the entrance and drank it slowly, watching people come and go. A woman about her age rushed past, phone pressed to her ear, apologizing to someone about being late. A couple sat across from her, the man's hand resting on the woman's knee, both of them staring at a patient information packet with matching expressions of quiet fear. An elderly man pushed his wife in a wheelchair, stopping every few feet to adjust her blanket, to ask if she was warm enough, to make sure she was comfortable. Marina finished her latte and threw the cup away. Then she sat back down and pulled out her phone. She called Lucia from the parking lot, sitting in her car with the windows down, watching clouds drift across the sky. The air smelled like rain even though it wasn't raining yet, that particular electric scent that meant weather was coming. How'd it go? Lucia answered on the first ring. Good. Scans are stable. Marina's voice sounded strange, lighter maybe, or just emptied out. That's great. That's amazing. Are you crying? I was. I'm okay now. Where's Greg? Client breakfast. Seattle people. Very crucial. Lucia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had that edge Marina knew well, the one that appeared when Lucia was deciding whether to say the thing or swallow it. She said the thing. Marina, what are we doing here? I don't know, Marina said. Yes, you do. Marina watched a bird land on the car next to hers, peck at something on the hood, fly away. The clouds were moving faster now, darkening at the edges. I changed my beneficiaries. When? Last week. Submitted everything. You're my primary. Lucia exhaled, long and slow. Okay. What does that mean? I don't know yet, Marina said, but I needed to do it. I needed something to be mine. Everything should be yours, Lucia said. That's how it's supposed to work. They talked for another 20 minutes, about logistics and feelings and the difference between the two. Lucia mentioned the guest room again, the job lead at her friend's architecture firm, the fact that Portland was beautiful in the fall, and Marina could take her time figuring things out. She talked about the neighborhood she lived in, the coffee shop on the corner where the barista knew everyone's name, the farmer's market on Saturdays. She painted a picture of a life that existed without Marina in it, but had space for her anyway. You don't have to decide right now, Lucia said, but I need you to know it's real. The job is real. The room is real. This isn't just me being supportive from a distance. I know, Marina said. Do you? Because you've spent so long making yourself smaller for him that I'm not sure you remember what taking up space feels like. The words landed hard. Marina closed her eyes. I remember. Good. Hold on to that. When they hung up, she sat for another 10 minutes before driving home. The rain started just as she pulled out of the parking lot, fat drops that hit the windshield like small declarations. By the time she got to their neighborhood, it was a downpour. She parked in the driveway and sat watching the water sheet across the glass, distorting the house until it looked like something from a dream. Greg's car wasn't there. She went inside, changed into studio clothes, and drove to the pottery studio even though it was the middle of the day and she'd never gone during daylight hours before. Ruth was there, working on a massive sculptural piece that looked like a wave frozen mid-crash. She looked up when Marina walked in, read her face, nodded toward the empty wheel beside her. Rough day? Good day, actually, Marina said. Just needed to be here. Best reason there is, Ruth said. Marina sat down and centered a new lump of clay. Her hands knew what to do: press, pull, shape, repeat. The wheel turned and her mind went quiet in that specific way it only did here, in this room, with her hands occupied and Ruth's presence nearby like an anchor. She worked on a bowl, then decided it wanted to be a vase, then let it become something else entirely, a vessel with a narrow neck and a wide base, uneven and imperfect in hers. When Marina finally looked up, Ruth was watching her with that knowing expression. What? Marina asked. You look different. Different how? Like you remember you exist, Ruth said, and went back to her wave. Marina looked down at the thing she'd made. It wasn't beautiful, not yet. It needed trimming and drying and glazing and firing, but it existed because she'd made it exist, and that felt like enough. Greg noticed thy distance the way you'd notice a lamp burning out. Gradually, then all at once, then with vague annoyance that something wasn't working the way it used to. She stopped mentioning appointments, stopped asking him to come to treatments, stopped performing gratitude for the minimal presence he offered. She went to scans alone, came home alone, marked good news on the calendar herself in quiet pen strokes he never looked at. She also stopped doing the small maintenance work of their marriage, stopped asking about his day in the specific way that invited real answers, stopped suggesting weekend plans, stopped buying his favorite snacks at the grocery store, stopped pretending she didn't notice when he forgot things. 2 weeks after her scan, he cornered her in the kitchen. "Are you mad at me?" Marina was chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, the knife steady against the cutting board. Carrots first, then peppers, the rhythm meditative. "No." "You seem mad." "I'm not mad." "Then what's going on? You've been distant." She set the knife down, turned to face him. He looked genuinely confused, which was almost worse than if he'd looked guilty. His hair was perfect, his shirt expensive, his expression that of a man encountering an unexpected obstacle. "I'm not distant, Greg. I'm just clear." "Clear about what?" "About who shows up." The words hung there between them. Greg opened his mouth, closed it, frowned. What does that mean? Marina waited, gave him the space to figure it out, to connect the dots, to see the pattern he'd been living without noticing. He just stood there, phone in his hand, expensive haircut perfect, expression blank. "Never mind," she said, and went back to chopping. He left the kitchen. She heard his office door close a minute later, heard the low murmur of him on a call. Work, probably, or his brother, or anyone who wasn't her. That night she slept on her side of the bed, and he slept on his, and the space between them felt like a canyon neither of them knew how to cross. She lay awake listening to him breathe, steady and untroubled, and thought about the years she'd spent learning his breathing patterns, knowing when he was actually asleep versus just lying there with his eyes closed. All that accumulated knowledge of another person's body, their rhythms, their habits. And for what? So she could lie here now and feel like she was sleeping next to a stranger? She got up at 2 in the morning and went downstairs. Made tea she didn't drink. Sat at the kitchen table and opened her laptop. The apartment listings she'd bookmarked were still there. She scrolled through them again, slowly this time, imagining herself in each space. A studio with exposed brick. A one-bedroom with a balcony. A garden unit with high ceilings and morning light. She saved 3 of them to a folder she labeled After. Marina started reorganizing her life the way you'd pack for a trip. Methodically, without announcement, one decision at a time. She opened a separate bank account at a different branch, transferred her pottery studio fund and the small inheritance from her grandmother that she'd never touched. The teller was young and efficient, explaining interest rates and online banking with practiced enthusiasm. Marina signed the papers and felt like she was signing herself into existence. She renewed her teaching certification online, filling out forms late at night while Greg watched TV downstairs. The process was tedious, uploading transcripts, documenting continuing education hours, paying fees, but she worked through it systematically. When the confirmation email arrived saying her certification was active, she printed it out and put it in a folder with her updated resume. She had long phone calls with Lucia about neighborhoods in Portland, about cost of living, about what it meant to start over at 43, with a cancer history and a marriage that had quietly died, without anyone pronouncing it. Lucia sent her links to job postings, photos of apartments, screenshots of the weather forecast, like proof that life existed elsewhere. "You don't have to decide everything right now," Lucia said during one call. "I know," Marina said, "but I need to know I could. I need to know the door's open." "The door's open," Lucia said. "It's been open. You just had to see it." Marina also started making lists, a habit she'd abandoned years ago when Greg said it made her seem controlling. Now she filled notebooks with them. Things she wanted to take, things she could leave behind. People to tell, people who didn't need to know yet, financial obligations, medical records to transfer, a whole architecture of departure sketched out in bullet points. At the pottery studio, she worked on a series of pieces, all vessels, all slightly different, all sharing a quality she couldn't quite name. Ruth watched her work one evening and said, "You're making a family." "What?" "Those." Ruth gestured at the shelf where Marina's pieces sat drying. "They belong together, like siblings." Marina looked at them, 7 vessels in varying heights and widths, each one imperfect, each one hers. "I didn't plan it that way." The best things aren't planned, Ruth said. Greg tried in his way. He came home early one Tuesday with flowers from the fancy grocery store. Peonies, her favorite, probably Googled in the parking lot. He put them in a vase himself, set them on the kitchen counter where she'd see them immediately. "What's this for?" Marina asked. "Do I need a reason?" He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I just wanted to do something nice." She thanked him, put her face near the flowers and inhaled their faint, sweet scent. They were beautiful. They were also 3 weeks too late and 6 months insufficient. He suggested the weekend getaway he'd been promising, showed her pictures of a bed and breakfast in wine country, a Victorian house with a garden, rooms with clawfoot tubs, a tasting room on the property. He scrolled through the photos on his phone, narrating amenities like a tour guide. "That sounds nice," Marina said, because it did in theory to someone. "I'll book it," Greg said. He forgot. Or he didn't forget. He scheduled a haircut during the time slot he'd promised to call and reserve the room, then apologized and said they could go the following weekend instead. The apology was elaborate, detailed, accompanied by more promises. Marina said that was fine. She stopped waiting for him to remember. The following week, he asked about her health. Actually asked, with what looked like genuine concern. They were having coffee on a Saturday morning, rare overlap in their schedules. "How are you feeling?" "Really?" "Good," Marina said. "Treatment's working." "That's great. That's really great." He nodded, sipped his coffee. "I know I haven't been as present as I should be. Work has been insane." "You've mentioned?" "I'm going to be better. Starting now, what do you need from me?" The question was so large and so late that Marina didn't know how to answer it. What did she need? For him to have shown up 6 months ago? For him to have noticed her fear without her having to perform it? For him to have chosen her on a random Tuesday without being asked? "I don't know," she said. "Well, think about it. I'm here. I want to help." But wanting wasn't the same as doing, and being here now didn't erase not being here then. Marina nodded and finished her coffee and felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing against her throat. Her next appointment was on a Wednesday in early December. She drove herself, parked in her usual spot 3 rows from the entrance, walked into the building with her folder of papers and her updated emergency contact form. The lobby was decorated for the holidays, a tree in the corner, garland wrapped around the information desk, instrumental versions of carols playing softly through hidden speakers. Dr. Patel went over her labs. Still good, still stable, still responding exactly as hoped. They talked about the next phase of treatment, about reducing the frequency of scans, about what maintenance would look like going forward. "You look better," Dr. Patel said, tilting her head slightly. "Not just the scans, you." Marina smiled. "I feel better." "Good. That's half the battle." On the way out, Marina stopped at the billing desk to update her insurance information. The woman behind the counter was new, cheerful, moving through the forms with practiced efficiency. She asked about Marina's emergency contact, and Marina said she'd already updated it with Dr. Patel. The woman nodded, typed something, then looked up with a practiced smile. "All set. Is there anything else we can help you with today?" "No," Marina said. "I think I'm good." She drove home steady, hands relaxed on the wheel, radio off. The quiet felt like company instead of absence. Holiday lights were starting to appear in the neighborhood, tasteful white strands on some houses, elaborate multicolored displays on others. Greg had mentioned getting lights this year, doing something festive. Marina wondered if he'd remember, if it would happen, if it mattered. When she pulled into the driveway, Greg's car was already there. Another early day, another attempt at presence. She sat for a moment before going in, gathering herself. Through the kitchen window, she could see him moving around, doing something at the stove. Actually cooking. He was making dinner when she walked in. Actual dinner, not takeout. Chicken and vegetables on the stove, rice in the cooker, the whole domestic tableau. He'd set the table, opened a bottle of wine. "Hey," he said when she walked in. "How'd it go?" She set her purse down. "Good. Everything's good." "That's great." He smiled, stirred something. "I thought we could eat together, actually talk. I feel like we haven't really talked in weeks." Marina leaned against the counter, watching him move through the kitchen he rarely used. He looked almost nervous, checking the chicken, adjusting the heat, tasting the vegetables. Performing care, like a skill he'd once known but had to remember how to do. "Greg," she said quietly, "I think we should separate." The spoon in his hand stopped moving. He looked at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't know. What? I think we should separate, she said again, calmer this time. Not with anger, just with clarity. Where is this coming from? His face cycled through confusion, shock, something that looked like hurt. I've been trying. I brought you flowers. I suggested the trip. I'm making dinner right now. I know, Marina said. Then what? He set the spoon down, turned to face her fully. What did I do wrong? She could have listed it. The appointments he missed, the questions he didn't ask, the months of her carrying her fear alone while he carried on like everything was fine because she was handling it. The beneficiary forms that listed his family but not hers. The casual cruelty of being too busy, always too busy, for the person who was supposed to matter most. The flowers that came 3 weeks late. The weekend trip he forgot to book. The dinner he was making now like it could retroactively fix the 100 dinners he'd missed. But the truth was simpler than a list. You were too busy when I needed you to not be, Marina said. The words landed like stones in still water. Greg stared at her, mouth half open, searching for something to say that would undo them. Nothing came. Behind him, steam rose from the forgotten vegetables. I love you, he said finally. Doesn't that count for something? It should, Marina said. But love isn't just the word. It's showing up. It's choosing someone when it's inconvenient. It's being there when they're scared and they can't ask, because asking feels like admitting they're not as strong as you need them to be. I'm here now, he said, and his voice cracked slightly. I know, but I can't keep waiting for crisis to make me matter. They stood there in the kitchen with the chicken overcooking on the stove and the rice cooker beeping its completion. Greg looked like he wanted to argue, to defend, to explain. His hands opened and closed at his sides, reaching for something he couldn't name. So, what happens now? He asked quietly. I'm going to find an apartment. Something small, near the pottery studio. Lucia is going to help me move. When? Soon. He nodded slowly, processing. The shock was settling into something else. Resignation, maybe, or just the beginning of understanding. Is there anything I can do? Marina thought about it, shook her head. I don't think so. Can we at least... He gestured vaguely at the table, the wine, the dinner he'd made. Can we eat? Talk about this? I don't think there's anything to talk about, Marina said. This isn't a negotiation. It's just what needs to happen. The chicken started smoking. Greg turned off the stove, moved the pan to a cold burner, stood there staring at it like it held answers. When he turned back to her, his eyes were red. I didn't realize, he said. I honestly didn't realize it was this bad. I know, Marina said and meant it. That was the saddest part. He genuinely hadn't seen it, hadn't felt the distance growing, hadn't noticed her slowly disappearing from their marriage, while he carried on with his perfect hair and crucial meetings. She went upstairs and left him standing in the kitchen. Later, she heard him scraping the ruined dinner into the trash, running water in the sink, opening and closing cabinets. The sounds of someone cleaning up a mess they didn't know they'd made. Lucia flew out on a Friday. Marina picked her up from the airport, and the moment Lucia folded her into a hug, Marina felt something in her chest finally unclench. You look good, Lucia said, pulling back to study her face. Seriously, you look like you. I feel like me, Marina said. They stopped for lunch on the way back, a sandwich place Lucia remembered from her last visit. They sat by the window and Lucia asked questions Marina hadn't realized she needed to answer. What was she scared of? What did she want her life to look like in 6 months? What would make her happy? I don't know yet, Marina said, but I know what doesn't anymore. That's a start, Lucia said. The apartment Marina had chosen was a 1-bedroom in an older building. Nothing fancy, but the light was good and it was a 10-minute walk from the studio. The landlord had held it for her after she'd explained her situation. Not all of it, just enough. Moving soon, separated, new start. He'd nodded and said his daughter had left her husband last year. Best thing she ever did. Lucia helped her pack the things that mattered. Clothes, books, the pottery pieces Marina had made over the past months, photos from before the marriage that she'd forgotten she had. Her grandmother's quilt. The stand mixer she'd bought herself for her birthday 3 years ago. A framed print of the Portland coast that Lucia had given her and that had been in the guest room for years. They left most of the furniture, the kitchen gadgets they'd registered for, the artwork that had always been more Greg's taste than hers. Marina moved through the house like an archaeologist, identifying what was hers versus what was theirs versus what had only ever been his. Greg oscillated between apologies and defensiveness, never quite landing on accountability. He'd say he was sorry, then explain why he'd been busy, then circle back to confusion about why trying now wasn't enough. He followed them from room to room sometimes, watching Lucia pack boxes with an expression that suggested he still didn't quite understand how he'd arrived here. "This seems extreme," he said at one point, watching Marina bubble wrap a ceramic piece. "We could do counseling. We could work on this." "We could have," Marina said, yet past tense. Lucia watched him with undisguised disdain and helped Marina pack faster. She had offered to handle all interactions with him, to be the buffer, but Marina said no. She needed to do this part herself, to see him clearly without anger softening the edges. "You deserve better than this," Lucia said once, folding sweaters into a box while Greg hovered in the doorway making comments about how they were being hasty. "I know," Marina said. On her last morning in the house, Marina woke up early. The movers were coming at 9, but she had 2 hours of quiet before everything changed. She made coffee in the kitchen one final time, stood at the counter where she'd stood 1,000 mornings before, looked out at the backyard with its motion sensor light. Greg's footsteps on the stairs made her turn. He appeared in the doorway in his pajamas, hair messed from sleep, looking more vulnerable than she'd seen him in months. "Marina," he said, "please, can we just talk?" "We've talked." "Not really. You've decided and I've just been scrambling to catch up." He came closer, stopped at the opposite end of the counter. "Tell me how to fix this." She looked at him. Really looked, maybe for the last time like this. He looked tired, scared. Young in a way that made her feel ancient. "You can't," she said, "not because you're not trying now, but because I can't forget the months you didn't." "People make mistakes," he said, "I know, and people live with consequences." Her phone was on the counter. She unlocked it, scrolled to her photos, found the wallpaper image, Greg laughing at their wedding, holding her like gravity itself couldn't pull them apart. She looked at it for a long moment, remembered how it felt to be loved like that, or to believe she was. Remembered the girl she'd been then, the way she'd looked at him like he was the answer to questions she hadn't known to ask. She didn't delete it, just archived it. Moved it to a folder she'd labeled before, because that's what it was, a document, of something that used to be true. Then she opened her photos from the past week. Found one Ruth had taken at the studio, Marina at the wheel, hands covered in clay, face concentrated and calm. She looked tired in the photo, thinner but alive, present, hers. She set it as her new wallpaper. Greg watched her do it, understanding finally settling into his expression. "So that's it?" "That's it," she said. Lucia came downstairs 10 minutes later, found Marina still standing there with her coffee, Greg gone back upstairs. "You ready?" Marina looked around the kitchen one last time. The espresso machine Greg had spent too much money on. The calendar with appointments he never noticed. The refrigerator covered in magnets from places they'd traveled when they still liked traveling together. The window where she'd watched that man help his mother into the car, patient and unhurried, while she'd sat alone in her own vehicle, waiting for a text that never said enough. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready." They walked out together, Marina carrying her coffee mug and the last box of things that mattered. The movers had already taken everything else. Behind them, the motion sensor light clicked off for the final time. The drive to the new apartment took 15 minutes. Lucia talked about logistics, where to set up the bed, where the good breakfast places were, when Marina should come to Portland to visit and see the architecture firm. Marina half listened, watching the familiar streets give way to unfamiliar ones, the landscape of her life shifting with each turn. The apartment was on the second floor, corner unit, south-facing windows. It smelled like fresh paint and possibility. The movers were already there, boxes stacked in the main room, waiting to be transformed into a home. Marina stood in the center of the empty living room, Lucia beside her, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not quite joy, not quite relief. Something more fundamental, the sense of standing on solid ground, of taking up space that was entirely hers, of breathing without permission. "Okay," Lucia said. "Where do we start?" Marina looked at the boxes, at the light coming through the windows, at her sister who had flown across the country to help her remember she was worth helping. She thought about the pottery pieces wrapped carefully in newsprint, about Dr. Patel's kind face and Ruth's knowing smile, about the beneficiary forms that now listed the people who'd actually shown up. The kitchen, Marina said. Let's start with the kitchen. They unpacked until evening, ordering pizza when they got hungry, laughing at inside jokes from childhood, building Marina's new life one box at a time. Around 7, Marina's phone buzzed. A text from Greg. I'm sorry, I hope you know that. She read it, typed back I know, and set the phone down. That night, after Lucia left to go to her hotel, Marina sat in her new living room with a cup of tea and her laptop. She opened her email and found a message from the architecture firm in Portland. Lucia's friend had forwarded her resume, wanted to set up a call. She scheduled it for the following Tuesday. Then she opened a new document and started a list. Not of things to do or people to call, but of things she wanted. Small things, large things, things she'd stopped wanting because wanting felt like asking for too much. She wanted morning light and good coffee. She wanted to teach again, to stand in front of a classroom and watch understanding bloom on students' faces. She wanted to make pottery that wasn't perfect. She wanted conversations that went deeper than surface pleasantries. She wanted someone to ask how she was doing and mean it, to wait for the real answer, to sit with her in the difficult parts without trying to fix them. She wanted to matter on a Tuesday. The list grew. By the time she closed her laptop, it was past midnight and she'd filled 3 pages. She brushed her teeth in her new bathroom, changed into pajamas in her new bedroom, lay down in her new bed under her grandmother's quilt. The apartment settled around her, unfamiliar sounds, different shadows, the particular quiet of a space that didn't have someone else's breathing in it. She thought about being alone, about the difference between alone and lonely, about how you could be lonely in a marriage and alone in an apartment, and they weren't the same thing at all. She fell asleep thinking about clay, how it could be shaped and reshaped, how it needed pressure to center, how it was strongest after it had been through fire.